Hello, everyone. How are you? Welcome to Protecting Your Data from Edge to Cloud Cybersecurity Discussion with HPE, Zerto, and WEI today. We appreciate you taking your time out of the day to join us for this event. I'm just going to give some people some time to join the call today. It looks like we have quite a few people that jumped on the call, so thank you. If you want to put in the chat, we'll just warm up the chat because we're probably going to use that a little bit here today for any questions that you might have. If you want to put in the chat, where you're calling in from, we can kind of see how that's working. We do have a really jam-packed hour for you today with Rachel Wilson, who's a director of cybersecurity at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management, and she was also a former NSA senior executive. So we're going to start off with her today, and then we will end with some discussions around Zerto and how that can help. And then also we'll end with Greg Labrie, who is our VP of Technology Solutions here at WEI. So thank you, Lee, for joining us from Massachusetts. Awesome. Nice to see. Chuck from Connecticut. Awesome. Welcome. Thank you. Looks like we still have some people joining. I know it's just a couple minutes past the hour. We'll probably get started at 12:03 here with some housekeeping, and then we'll go right into the introduction for Rachel. So thank you all for joining. All right, so I'll just get it started here. I would like to just go over a few housekeeping items. So let's all just stay on mute for the presentation part so that Rachel can get everything out there to you guys that she wants to convey over to you. And also during Tim and Greg's presentation, let's just stay on mute. If you have any questions afterwards and you'd like to come off mute and ask those questions, please feel free to do that. Or you can use the chat and type in your question. I can relay that question over to Rachel or the team here. So with that, I think we can get started. We are going to, I'm going to introduce you to Rachel Wilson. Rachel is a managing director of Morgan Stanley and head of wealth management, data security, and infrastructure risk. Her team of security professionals is responsible for protecting all client data from any type of theft, loss, and compromise. She also oversees the resilience of wealth management's critical infrastructure and the continuity of core business processes. Additionally, Rachel supervises the Client Fraud Risk Program. As a senior subject matter expert, Rachel regularly advises wealth management leadership and clients on the cyber threats and mitigation strategies. In 2019, Rachel was recognized by Morgan Stanley Wealth Management as part of the Makers Class, a program that honors women who serve as groundbreakers, innovators, and advocates. She was also named one of the top women in Wealth Tech 2020 by Think Advisor. Prior to joining the firm in 2017, Rachel spent 15 years at the NSA, where she held several senior executive positions. Some of those positions included running NSA's counterterrorism operations, as well as the chief of operations in the UK, where she worked to counter terrorist and cyber threats to 2012 Olympics. Rachel then spent nearly 5 years leading NSA's cyber exploitation operations as the deputy and then chief of Remote Operations Center. Please help me welcome Rachel Wilson to the event today. Thank you.
Well, Kathy, thank you so much for that warm introduction. And HPE, WEI, it is an absolute pleasure to be joining all of you this morning, this afternoon, wherever our conversation today happens to find you. Of course, as we all know, we are, I would say, celebrating Cybersecurity Awareness Month here in October. But for those of us in the cybersecurity space, this really is a 24/7, 365-day-a-year job. But again, happy to be with all of you this morning, and we have a lot of ground to cover. First and foremost, as Kathy mentioned, I currently run cybersecurity, data protection, and fraud prevention for Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. And in a nutshell, that means that I and my team of cyber professionals are responsible for making sure that every system, every network, every application that we field to our 15,000 financial advisors around the country and our 15 million clients around the world, that all of those systems are as time-tested, battle-hardened, hacker-proofed as possible before we put them out there in the world. And today we're going to talk a little bit of a world tour, all of the risks and threats that we see, how things have changed over the course of the pandemic, and then, of course, the geopolitical situation we find ourselves here in 2022. We're going to talk about ransomware, resilience, all the things we need to be doing to better protect ourselves and the challenges that we face in the cybersecurity space, whether that's in terms of recruiting top talent, retaining that talent, managing our security workforce, and leveraging partners as we all work to raise the waterline for our cybersecurity. Now, as Kathy mentioned, I spent the first 15 years of my career all at the National Security Agency, where I spent a couple of years running the counterterrorism operations mission. That, in essence, was using technical means to get onto the devices used by terrorists, their tablets, their smartphones, all of the devices they were using with the goal of listening to their phone calls, reading their email, geolocating them, all the kinds of things you would expect the NSA to be doing vis-a-vis terrorists globally. Then, as a bit of a reward, you can imagine that was a pretty stressful job, I got to spend a couple of years in the UK helping the British get ready for the 2012 Summer Olympics. Now, of course, every 4 years when the Olympics rolls around, all the eyes of the world turn to that city, that country, and those include the eyes of terrorists and hackers. Now, the British, given their history, I can tell you, very well versed in terrorist plotting. We Americans on site were not worried about the terrorist plots. We knew the British had those well in hand. So for us on site, we were really concerned about the cyber threats to those Olympics. As you could imagine, we had the Chinese trying to hack into the clocks, the timers at the Olympic venues. We had the Russians trying to get into the databases that housed the Olympic drug testing records, which makes perfect sense now, made no sense to us at the time. All kinds of miscreants looking to rub some grit in the eyes of the British, ruin those Olympics in some way, shape, or form. I was thrilled to see the games go off without a hitch and return home to suburban Maryland, where the NSA is headquartered, to spend my last 5 years, as Kathy mentioned, in what I would tell all of you on a personal note, really was my dream job. This was the job that I had wanted from the day that I started at the NSA, and that was running the NSA's cyber exploitation operations mission. So these are essentially our professional American hackers. In this job, I would go to the top universities and colleges around the country, trying to recruit these new young computer scientists and computer engineers. As all of you would expect, I couldn't offer them anything like the salaries they were getting offered from technology and from finance, it being government, but I could give them the opportunity, in all frankness, to do something that would be illegal anywhere else. And as you all can imagine, for a particular ilk of young person, that opportunity to no longer be beholden to the Computer Fraud and Abuses Act, quite an alluring proposition. So we bring these young folks in, we give them 18 months of highly classified training, and then we would conduct these very sensitive operations all over the world, hundreds of operations a day, hacking into the networks of the North Koreans, the Iranians, the Russians, the Chinese, stealing the secrets out of their networks, giving them to our policymakers, our war fighters, all with the goal of keeping the United States and her allies safe. After 5 years in my dream job, they wanted me to go do something else, and that didn't appeal. And so I decided to make that change, come to the private sector, try my hand at something new. And so I and my team bring all of that practitioner level hacking experience to the defense of Morgan Stanley's systems and networks and applications. So with all of that in mind, what are my sources of sleepless nights in this job? What do I worry about for me, for my clients, for my employees? And equally importantly, what do I worry about for all of you? Why are we having this really important conversation today? It's because I would tell you 20 plus years in the cybersecurity space. This is the only thing I've ever done. For me, this is a calling. This is my life's work. I've never seen the environment quite as dire as it is today. So when I think about my sources of sleepless nights, at the highest levels, they remain advanced persistent threats, nation state level cyber actors with unlimited means, unlimited talent, and unlimited time. For me, top of the list probably is North Korea. North Korea, of course, is up against staunch international sanctions, has no domestic economy to speak of, and yet is trying to fund a wildly expensive missile and nuclear program. We've all seen the byproducts of that missile program over the last few weeks. Pretty scary stuff going on. So how is North Korea doing this? How are they funding their government and these expensive programs in 2022? Well, they've essentially made it a major plank of their national strategy that they're going to fund their government by hacking into banks and stealing money, right? You think about it, that old adage, why rob banks? It's where the money is. We just never expected to see a nation take that on as the source of their gross domestic product. But that's exactly what North Korea has done. And they've resourced their bank hacking strategy at a very high level. So estimates have it now at 7,000 people within the North Korean government who have bank hacking as their full-time job. And those ranks just continue to grow. Now, I will tell you, Kathy, I tell my kids all the time how fortunate they are that they did not grow up in North Korea. My teenage daughter likes to joke that having me as a mom feels like growing up in North Korea, but this is not fair. The fact is that the reason our kids should be grateful, among other things, is that the North Koreans have implemented a national policy whereby every 11-year-old child is administered an aptitude test. You score best and brightest on that North Korean aptitude test, and you're immediately on-ramped into the bank hacking program. These kids moved away from their families into dormitories, raised, trained to be hackers from the age of 11. Also unfortunate for all of us on this call today playing defense, the North Koreans have proven very adept and effective with their hacking strategy. Some of you will have watched the movie, read the book, listened to the excellent podcast about the Lazarus Group, advanced persistent threat actor in North Korea that successfully hacked into the central bank of Bangladesh and carted off close to $100 million over a long weekend. These are non-trivial dollar sums the North Koreans are going after. But what not everyone knows about that particular heist is that the North Koreans were a typographical error away, a spelling mistake away from that being close to $1 billion, an eighth of the reserves of the entire nation of Bangladesh, potentially gone over a 3-day weekend. And that this was not a one-off for the North Koreans. Again, this is their national strategy, so much so that last year the United Nations published a report supporting the allegations of 27 countries around the world, all of whom are asserting, correctly in my view, that the North Koreans have come after some aspect of their central bank over the last 3 years to the tune of more than $3 billion globally. Scary enough when you think about those losses and when you think about where that money is going, really scary stuff. At a level right below North Korea, I also worry a lot in this job about Iran. Now, of course, Iran is a very different animal. They are not hacking for money. They are hacking because they've long recognized that cyber represents an asymmetric threat. That you could imagine sailing an aircraft carrier here into New York Harbor is a decade-long project. Building a nuclear weapon, thank goodness, has proven to be quite difficult. But what the Iranians have done in the past, and what we know they would do again if tensions got really fraught with the West, is literally put 40 guys in the basement of a building in Tehran and manage to wreak havoc on Wall Street. Again, this is exactly what the Iranians did in the 2012 to 2014 timeframe, going bank to bank to bank, 46 banks in 2.5 years, conducting wildly disruptive denial of service attacks, all in retaliation for things like economic sanctions, military action, cyber activities, lots to be worried about in this space. But what about for all of you, frankly, for all of us, The sea change in the cybersecurity landscape over the last 5 years is this. If you went back in time 5 years ago, the vast majority of quote unquote offensive cyber activity that you would have seen on the internet was nation states, right? It was Rachel in her NSA capacity. It was the British, the Israelis, the Chinese, you name it, all of these countries hacking each other to conduct espionage and to gather intelligence. Now, of course, especially given the current situation with Russia, all of that nation state cyber activity is still happening at scale. But it is now dwarfed by the volume of offensive cyber activity that is criminal in nature and that is financially motivated. And that's the key thing for all of us, is to recognize that now 70% of that malicious cyber activity is coming after us because it's coming after anyone with two nickels to rub together. Doesn't matter whether you're a company, an institution, a university, a nonprofit, a house of worship, or an individual, these hackers are taking an opportunistic approach. They are not targeting you because you're you, they're targeting you because you're vulnerable. They are literally doing scans of broad swaths of the internet, looking for entities that are vulnerable to cyber attacks, getting access, and then figuring out how to monetize that access. And that means that all of us need to be viewing that cyber attack as not an if, but rather as a when. Now, I want to give you an example this morning, of the kind of cyber attack that we see typically launched by what we would call a cyber criminal syndicate. So these, again, are traditional organized crime rings that are now using cyber means in order to conduct crime at a scope, a scale, a velocity that frankly boggles the mind from where we were 5 years ago. But first, who are these cyber criminals? The answer might surprise you. You think about those North Korean government hackers that we just talked about. Now, they certainly are a well-motivated workforce because we all know the consequences of poor job performance in North Korea, but they're not well compensated. So what's the perk? What is the benny to being that North Korean government hacker? Well, it's that you get to take your cyber toolkit home with you nights and weekends, and you get to use it for your own personal betterment. And we see this not just in North Korea, but in Russia, China, all across Eastern Europe. Hackers that work for their government by day and then work as hackers for hire nights and weekends. Now, as a hacker for hire, we see them working for other governments on contract. This year, we've seen a huge upswing in hacktivist activities. These are hackers that hack for political reasons, but some of these hackers are working for these cyber criminals. An example of the kinds of attacks we see on a regular basis: any of us who run a customer, client, employee, internet-facing portal, a place where folks can log in, you've likely experienced the classic credential validation attack. This is, of course, where a hacker goes out to the dark web, buys 10 million credential pairs, logins and passwords. These logins and passwords have nothing to do with you, nothing to do with me. These are the logins and passwords of all the companies that have been hacked over the last few years. Hackers get in, they go after the customer database with all those logins and passwords, dump them all for sale on the dark web. Now, why does the hacker want all of these old logins and passwords? It's because he knows that many of us are victims of that particular form of human frailty that causes us to reuse the same password again and again and again. And I know, Kathy, we want to talk more about passwords and how to better manage them, but passwords are a pain. Hackers know that we're lazy, and so they're going to take those 10 million logins and passwords and throw them against, say, our bank's front door just to see what sticks, see who's reusing that same password. But think how long that would take the hacker to enter all of those usernames and passwords. He'd be doing that for the rest of his life. So what does he do to speed up the process? Again, this is all about scale and velocity. Well, the hacker is going to go back to the dark web and rent a botnet, right? Simply thousands of highly hackable endpoint devices. These are your Internet of Things type devices, smart TVs, smart toasters. Last week's attack, literally 10,000 smart refrigerators. Imagine for a minute having to explain to your board of directors that you were under attack by 10,000 smart refrigerators. I kid you not. But these refrigerators, right, they're smart, but not that smart. All the botnet were returns is a simple thumbs up, thumbs down. Vast majority of cases, thumbs down. This login and password don't work for any customer of this institution, but for that small but non-zero percentage that return a thumbs up, that's when we see the hackers setting up bill payments, money movements in my case, all the kinds of things you would have seen a traditional fraudster do, but now again enabled by cyber means, so at scope, at scale, at velocity. Where does that leave us today? Now, certainly over the course of the pandemic, all of us in the cybersecurity space were challenged. We saw an 80% increase in attempted cyber attacks over the course of the pandemic. And of course, both our employees and in some cases our customers, we're operating in a depleted mental state, right? They're tired, they're multitasking, they're all experiencing the stress that was the pandemic. And that meant that we saw people clicking on links, downloading attachments, doing all the kinds of things that we, celebrating Cybersecurity Awareness Month, would tell you not to do. Working from home certainly amplified all of that risk. So with those increased attacks, here we are in 2022, and when I tell you that the risk landscape is more dire than ever before, this is in no small part because of what I've deemed the 3 Rs: Russia, ransomware, and resilience. Now let's talk about Russia. You rewind to the beginning of the year, all of us were braced for impact. You had President Biden tweeting, telling us, especially in financial services, be ready for those Russian cyber attacks. Now we're getting to the end of October, and it's been interesting to see how this has actually panned out. Now, if we were live together today, I would ask all of you the question, where are you on the spectrum of what Russia is actually attempting vis-a-vis the United States and American industries? One end of the spectrum would say, nope, nothing to see here. Russians are sitting on their hands, not coming after us in any way, shape, or form. My guess would be you all are smarter than to know that we're not in that camp. The other end of the spectrum, of course, is equally concerning, right? Maybe that means that the Russians are coming after us with a vengeance and we're not seeing those attacks. I would argue to all of you today that I think we're seeing something right in the middle. We just talked about this huge upswing in criminal cyber activity. What we think is happening is that the Russians are, in fact, conducting nation-state level cyber activities at scale, but that they're actively obfuscating those activities to look criminal in nature. So instead of that full frontal slap in the face, that could potentially result in escalation, they're hiding in that noise, bleeding American industry with their cyber attacks, but without creating those escalatory circumstances. So if you take that backdrop, where are we then with ransomware? Far and away the most lucrative form of cyber attack in 2021, 20 billion in losses just in the United States between ransoms paid, downtime, lost productivity. Again, far and away the most lucrative form of cyber attack in the world. Why? It's because people keep paying. And the more we pay, the more we incentivize these kinds of cyber attacks. Why have they become so lucrative? Because now these are what we call triple extortion scams. These hackers are looking for a continuous revenue model out of these hacks. And when we say triple extortion, the first thing the hacker is going to do is get into your environment and figure out what you value most. And this is why ransomware is different than some of your more traditional forms of cyber attack. Historically, I've had people say, Rachel, I'm not worried about a cyber attack. I don't have anything anyone else would want. But that's the difference with ransomware. It's not about what anyone else wants. It's about what you value, what you would be willing to pay to keep. And that doesn't matter whether you're a company with potentially customer data, employee data, proprietary data, source code, whether you're an institution, an endowment, a nonprofit, a house of worship. We see all of these entities being attacked by ransomware actors. Once they get in and they've stolen whatever it is you value, the next thing they're going to do is irrevocably encrypt your systems. That could be your desktops, that could be your production environment, that could be your customer-facing website, that could be your back-end databases. Now you'll receive the first of 3 very scary phone calls. First phone call, hacker says, you've noticed you came in this Monday morning and your systems aren't working. If you want your systems to be restored, if you want the key to decrypt your environment, I'll need 500,000 in this cryptocurrency equivalent to this account in South Africa by 2 o'clock. Now, maybe you pay, maybe you don't pay. We, of course, never recommend paying a ransom because, of course, when you pay, you've now indicated your willingness to pay, which means the hackers will just keep coming back. But maybe you pay. And then, of course, the hacker, now these guys are very reputationally sensitive. They're going to get their IT support on the phone. They are going to help you decrypt your systems. Again, they want you to have a good experience. We see hackers now actually sending their victims customer surveys after the fact. How was your ransomware experience with us? Why are they doing this? They want you to tell your friends and neighbors that when you paid, you got support in restoring your systems. Now, again, of course, we never want to be in that position of having to pay. Maybe you pay. The hacker is not done with you. The second phone call, the hacker says, well, while I was in your environment, I stole the data that you care about most, employee data, customer data, proprietary data. And if you don't want me to sell it on the dark web, if you don't want me to sell it to your staunchest competitor, to that national tabloid, I'm going to need another 500,000 in this cryptocurrency equivalent to this account, and you've only got 24 hours to pay. Now, again, we never want to have to be in a position of paying to have our data not sold on the dark web. But, you know, many entities are willing to pay in those situations. They don't want to have that reputational risk. Maybe you pay, maybe you don't, but the hacker is still not done with you. That third phone call, hacker says, I never left your environment. And today your systems are up and running. Today your data is not for sale on the dark web. But if you want to come in tomorrow and find your systems up and running and your data still not for sale, I'm going to need you to pay a monthly fee in perpetuity to avoid me encrypting your systems or selling your data. And here's the kicker. These hackers now, in some cases, will even go a step further, that in addition to agreeing not to encrypt and not to sell, they will actually agree to help protect your systems from other hacking groups that would seek to do you harm. This is the brave new world we are living in 2022, where I sadly have many customers that are not happily, but are willingly paying thousands of dollars a month to one Eastern European hacking group to presumably protect them from the rest. Again, this is why this conversation is so important that we're having today, because none of us want to be in this situation. And the good news is all is not lost. There is a lot that we can do within the cybersecurity and resilience space to make ourselves more protected from and resilient to exactly these kinds of cyber activities. Now, when it comes to cybersecurity, as you all know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. This is why we're all so religious about training our employees not to click on links, not to download attachments from unsolicited sources. It's why we're constantly sending them the simulated phishing test. It's why we have awareness conversations like this one. In the IT space, though, we need to be doing our part. And at the top of the list, some of this, right, not expensive and not particularly sexy, right? This is the basic hygiene, the brushing your teeth and eating your Wheaties of cybersecurity, crucially important, maybe more important than ever before. And top of that list, of course, is keeping all of our systems, our operating systems, our devices, our browsers, the apps on our phone, all fully patched and up to date. Now, we all know this, but we have to recognize, right? Again, all software manufacturers always discovering new flaws, new bugs, new vulnerabilities in their code. They are fixing those vulnerabilities, and they are sending us as consumers the fix in the form of that patch, that software update. When that patch is released, we, of course, enter into a race condition with the hackers. For us, that patch is the solution to the security vulnerability we didn't even know we had. But for the hackers, that patch is an opportunity. The hacker is going to reverse engineer the patch, discover the underlying vulnerabilities that it mitigates, and work to weaponize those vulnerabilities against anyone who has not yet patched. That means the onus is on us to execute that patch quickly, comprehensively across all of our devices, all of our plant, our entire platform, so that we are effectively immunized against those vulnerabilities and they can't be used against us. Now, what if we go back to the idea that we need to view these kinds of cyber attacks as more of a when and not an if? This gets us to our third R, around resilience. crucially important that we all be prepared for that perhaps inevitable cyber attack. Top of the list in terms of preparedness absolutely means having our data backed up. Now, I ascribe to the classic 3-2-1 backup strategy that you want 3 copies of your data in 2 geographically dispersed locations, one of which is removed from your network, right? Off your line, not in your environment. This, of course, is why, again, our cloud storage and a big part of our conversation today are so important. We want to have those cloud backups. We want to have those offline backups. We want to have the resilience baked into our systems such that if we are victims of a ransomware actor, we are not in a position of having to pay. We want that data protected in our environment, and we want it available to us. This is your classic CIA triangle, right? We want to keep that data confidential. We want to keep it safe and sanguine, and we want to make sure it's available to our business so that we are in a position of being able to carry on business as usual, come the hell or high water. Equally important, I would argue, is that all of us in our capacities are routinely, actively practicing the process of restoring from backups. I cannot tell you how many customers I met with last year who swore to me, hand over heart, Rachel, my data is backed up, only to a week later have their cyber bad day and discover that those backups were overwritten, that they were corrupted 4 months ago, that the guy who set up those backup systems doesn't work here anymore. This is not the news that any of us want to get from our IT teams. Instead, we want to be routinely practicing that process of restoring from backups so that it is second nature. This is all about training like we're going to fight, being prepared for that cyber bad day, and ensuring that everyone in our business, everyone in our C-suite through our technology ranks understands their role, their responsibility, their requirements, if and when that cyber bad day happens. So what does this mean for all of us? And what is the rest of our conversation this morning going to look like? Again, the cyber risk landscape is more dire than I've ever seen it in my 20 plus years as a cybersecurity professional. That said, all is not lost. And in fact, I think our message today is a very optimistic one. We've learned a lot over these last 3 years about how to better protect ourselves, how to be more resilient and responsive to those cyber actors. At the same time, our security teams are overwhelmed. They're suffering from the paradox that I know all of you are familiar with, where they have both too many tools at their disposal, too much data at their disposal, and at the same time, insufficient tooling and insufficient data to do their jobs. We got to make sure that we are doing everything we can to facilitate the tooling and the analysis for our security operations teams, arming them with the insights to be effective and to both detect and respond to these inevitable cyber attacks. It means we need to be prepared, soup to nuts, top to bottom. And it means that, again, we need to view this as a when, not an if. That means conversations like the one we're having today. I would encourage all of you, the companies you support, but not just in your corporate capacity, thinking about all of the many hats that you wear as professionals and that you wear in your communities. In addition, thinking about the many hats that you wear amongst your families. These cyber threats are coming after all of us. They don't discriminate, and that means all of us in 2022 need to be raising our game. All right, with that, Kathy, I'm going to turn this back to you. I know we want to open this discussion up, take some questions. We can take this conversation anywhere folks would like, and then we're going to talk solutions, which I'm excited about.
Excellent. Thank you, Rachel. That was amazing. That was really a great conversation. I know the 3 R's, when you went through those were really hitting home with some of the things that I was thinking about in my own personal life. And then also, those are a great starting point for us to start protecting our data. So that's great. We will open it up to any questions. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to take yourself off mute or type your question into the chat. While we maybe wait for somebody to have a question, I do have a question for you. What is something that keeps you up at night, and what's something that, we really should be planning for cybersecurity and combating those ransomware attacks that we are subject to?
So Kathy, it's a great question. And again, I think what I would emphasize to this audience is just how opportunistic this targeting is, right? Not targeting you because you're you, but targeting you because you're vulnerable. And we are seeing much more of this, scanning of network, scanning of just generic IP space, looking for people who have not yet patched, looking for open ports, leveraging those, commodity type vulnerabilities to really then, escalate privileges, move laterally in networks, and conduct these very, very detrimental ransomware attacks. The big change, again, is that these are not just about small and mid-sized companies anymore, your classic ransomware targets. We're seeing this everything from, an attack just last week against one of the largest universities in the United States, where they went after the alumni records. Imagine if a university can't access and leverage their alumni records. Also recognizing those alumni records are highly sensitive. This was a university that was not well prepared for a cyber attack. But we're seeing this all the way down, Kathy, to individuals, right? People, who pick up the phone, convinced that Microsoft is calling them. Of course, we know Microsoft is never going to call us and tell us that we have malware on our computer. But lots of Americans, again, during the course of the pandemic, were falling for these IT phone scams, thinking that, someone was there to help, giving them remote access to their computer. Of course, then the hacker installs the keylogger, is taking screenshots of all the websites they're going to, leveraging their information to conduct identity theft. These sorts of attacks, ransomware at the individuated level, we're seeing a real upswing there.
Yeah, right. Great. Did anybody else have any questions?
Yep, I did, Kathy. This is John Bouchard. Hi, Rachel. Great presentation, phenomenal information. One of the things, like you said, is it's going down to the single user now, seeing it all across the board. I think it's very hard for people to understand when it's really truthful and when it's ransomware. Like banks sending out a text, they do send stuff. But is there a rule of thumb when it comes to certain things like banking and other things? Like, would they never send you a text? Would they never send you an email? Things like that people can look at, because I know the ransomware is huge within the individual community.
So, John, you are so right. And, this is why I'm always telling my employees that they are both my first line of defense and my greatest point of risk. And I think the risk, especially as you're articulating it around social engineering, is just critical. I mean, this is why, of course, you think about multi-factor authentication, and many of us are leveraging one-time passcodes, those text messages that we send you that you got to enter in to prove that you are who you say you are. That's why you see those bright red banners at the top of that text message now that says, "We will never ask you for this over the phone. Don't give this to someone who is calling you." I think the bottom line, John, is anything you're receiving inbound, high degree of skepticism. You call the phone number on the back of your bank card, you can feel good that you're talking to your bank, but anyone who calls you and tells you that they're calling from your bank, that's when alarm bells should start going off, right? I would immediately hang up the phone and call my bank back at that number that's on my statement or on my bank card. It's those incoming calls. And these fraudsters, this, John, they are incredibly sophisticated and manipulative. We even see them bullying customers, right? I mean, they are trained in these psychological tactics. They can be very, very compelling. If you feel like any of you feel like you're in that situation, hang up the phone, call your bank at a true registered number, be highly skeptical of anything inbound.
Great, thanks. Phenomenal information.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Rachel. That was some great advice for people. So thank you so much. Well, since we don't have any other questions, unless there's any last minute questions, we're going to move on to our next presenter. Thank you, Rachel. If you'd like to hang on the line, and if we get any other questions, we can certainly turn back to you with any other questions that people may have. But now we're going to bring up Tim Carroll, who's a system engineer at Zerto, which is a HPE company now. And Tim is going to go through how to combat some of those ransomwares. So take it over, Tim.
Yep, thank you very much, Kathy. And can you hear me okay? And can you see my screen?
Yes, your screen looks good and I can hear you just perfect.
Okay, excellent. And Rachel, fantastic conversation. 4 takeaways I wanted to reiterate with the audience. It's not a matter of if, it's when. Cyber hacking and ransomware is a business, right? It's very lucrative business. They have operators standing by to take your payment. Third takeaway is don't pay, right? That just encourages more ransomware attacks and things of that nature. And obviously, in order not to pay, you've got to back up, you have to protect, and you have to be prepared. So again, thank you for that, Rachel. So my name is Tim Carroll. I'm a system engineer for Zerto. Been here about 4 years. And about 14 months ago, HPE acquired Zerto. And the purposes of that acquisition is to bring Zerto's industry-leading disaster recovery into the GreenLake platform to be sold as a service. So for those who are not familiar with Zerto, our bread and butter has always been disaster recovery, ransomware recovery, and multi-cloud mobility. And that is, those features have always been on the foundation of CDP, or continuous data protection. So Zerto is 100% software. We're not tied to any particular storage vendor or server vendor. And CDP is at the block layer. So when we start protecting virtual machines with Zerto, we'll monitor those virtual disks at the block layer. And anytime we see a change, we'll take a copy of that change, we'll compress it, we'll encrypt it, and we'll replicate it off to your target site. Now, your target site could be another one of your data centers or a colo facility, but it can also be the public cloud like AWS, Azure, or Google. And we also work with 400 plus private cloud providers as well. And it doesn't have to be an either or situation. Zerto has the ability to replicate simultaneously to both on-prem environments and cloud environments. So an example of why that would be important to customers is a storm like Hurricane Ian, right? If Ian wipes out the region, the power for the region where both your data centers are housed, right? I could recover those workloads into public cloud and you can resume business from there. Zerto does not install any agents in your production VMs. We're not performing any snapshots. There's no scheduling that you have to manage with Zerto. And the CDP is always on and it's always protecting your data. So layered on top of that CDP technology is our journal. And if anybody has ever gotten a sales presentation from Zerto before, you know we talk about the Zerto a lot, because it's really the journal a lot, because it's really a game changer. So you can think of the journal as a catalog of all the changes that we've been replicated for the past 30 days. And then within that journal, we insert checkpoints every 5 to 10 seconds. So this allows a company, if something happens at say 10 a.m. as an example, I can go to the checkpoint that's labeled at 9:59 and 55 seconds and recover from that point, losing only 5 seconds worth of data. If you compare that to traditional snapshotting technologies, you may be losing hours worth of data. And certainly if you're relying on traditional backup products, you could be losing 24 hours worth of data or more. Now, recovery isn't just about recovering individual VMs, right? You have to take the applications into account as well. So with Zerto, we utilize consistency groups. And the concept there is if you think of an application and the VMs that support that application, I can logically group those together into what we call a VPG, or virtual protection group. And that means that when I recover, I can recover all those VMs back to the exact same point in time. And that helps maintain right order fidelity across the VMs within that virtual protection group. This also allows me to perform testing. So to Rachel's point, you have to be able to test improve and test again to make sure that you can recover, you can survive some type of cyber event. And Zerto allows you to non-disruptively test your recoveries for your applications, for your VMs, without impacting your production environment. Now, I talked about protecting virtual machines in utilizing public cloud as a target, but Zerto can also help protect workloads that are already running in the public cloud. So Zerto can help you protect between availability zones and also protect between regions within the cloud. And unique to Zerto, we have the ability to help customers migrate out of particular clouds. So maybe if you have an application running in Azure and you wanted to migrate that out into AWS, Zerto can help facilitate that migration. Also unique to Zerto, we brought in that CDP functionality and journaling into the Kubernetes world. So if you're starting to deploy applications and services in contained environments, we can group those containers together, protect that persistent data that might be in those containers, and help customers protect those new next-gen Kubernetes environments. Zerto provides a tool for monitoring and managing the environment. We call it Zerto Analytics. And from here, you can see all of the alerts or events that might be going on in your environment. I can report on your RPOs over time. I can also report on the VMs that I'm protecting with Zerto. And sometimes more importantly, I can report on VMs that are not being protected by Zerto. So you know exactly what isn't being protected. And Zerto also has a planning tool within Zerto Analytics that helps customers plan out how much WAN bandwidth would be required and how much storage would be required when you start adding workloads into Zerto's protection. I won't spend too much time on this, but we have lots of customer success stories that showcase Zerto's value, particularly around ransomware recovery, cost of avoidance, downtime avoidance, consolidating multiple tools with Zerto, DR tools with Zerto, and of course, improving operational efficiencies. So we can reach out to the HPE account teams or the WorldCom account teams for starting those conversations. And then early this year at HPE's customer event, HPE announced that Zerto will be the technology moving forward for GreenLake's disaster recovery as a service. So this will be an orchestrated disaster recovery service managed within the GreenLake platform. So our customer will be able to pair their existing hypervisor-based environment to GreenLake and be able to start protecting, testing, reporting on that protection and SLAs from there. And there's a link there that you can go and sign up for that preview. So once all this is integrated, essentially, all these services can be seamlessly blended in to provide DR and backup and retention, along with testing and recoverability across on-prem environments, hybrid environments, and multi-cloud environments. And the goal is to be able to protect all of your data, regardless of where it lives, and be able to recover that data wherever you need that data recovered. So the net result is that Zerto will harness all the technology benefits that we've been talking about to deliver ransomware recovery, disaster recovery, backup and long-term retention, and multi-cloud mobility. So HPE Data Protection as a Service will be a suite of cloud-based services designed to protect your data for every SLA, eliminating risk of data loss, mitigating threats from ransomware, and delivering rapid data recovery. And with that, thank you, Kathy. I'll hand it back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. That was really great. I know that the introduction to GreenLake is something that will be beneficial for a lot of people to utilize. So that's great. I'm going to move us along here. I'm going to introduce Greg Labrie, who is our VP of Technology Solutions, and Greg will give you an overview of WEI and how we are working with HPE and Zerto. So take it over, Greg.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'll spend about 5 minutes here. As the slide deck goes nuts. I'll spend about 5 minutes here going over a couple topics. One is for those that don't know, who is WEI, and then spend a little bit of how we work with HPE. Specifically, I'll spend a slide talking about what Kathy and Tim just mentioned, which is HPE GreenLake. And how that consumption model works and how we work with it. So WEI, for those that don't know, as it's on the slide, we're a value-added reseller. We're headquartered in the Northeast here, but we have customers worldwide. And we've been around for about 32 years. And as it says, we have about 150 employees, of which half are either certified engineers, similar to Tim, in that they have subject matter expertise across the board with HPE products and others. Some of them are more design, some of them are implementation. We also have another larger group of about 40 technicians that are, I would say, field engineers. The people who come and rack and stack, and we have a lot of integration and imaging that we do for customers. So, taking over that responsibility. So very heavily engineering focused in that entire organization there. So 10 total outside salespeople. So the rest of the people, they can just fill in, operationally helping to satisfy all of our customers' needs. We're privately owned by Belisario and Leslie Rosa since 1989, and Belisario's from Peru, and so we're a minority-owned small business as well. Debt-free is important to those because we don't need to wait for certain things. HPE is a pretty sizable organization, so we can act quick. We can take advantage of that fact to make decisions on our own without being held to stockholders or other investors in the company, because there is none. You can see here we've got different awards, including some HPE Partner of the Year, and we have some from customers, which we really like for sure, to get recognized by customers for doing a good job for them. And I'll move on to the next slide. So I'm going to go fast through some of these slides because, again, this is lots of customers, all probably recognizable names from on here. So, we have lots of customers. Some of them are very large. Some of them we've had for a long, long time. Some of them since 1989, actually. And we continue to add value to customers. So that continues to grow to us year over year. WEI has and provides IT solutions across the stack. Our pillars kind of fall into these areas here, data center, enterprise mobility, network security. And as the conversation we had about security goes, security is everywhere. So, Rachel was talking from just receiving an email, having your laptop or your device protected, phone, anything. And obviously, as IT people, we know that we have to provide security in different areas: the data center, on the device, just at the perimeter of your to the internet and to your other remote sites. and also, in and to the cloud, which is really important. So there's security throughout, and our security practice, fills in every one of these buckets, and as well as we're very, very knowledgeable on, data protection tools like Zerto in order to deploy that, not just for, replicating and backing up your data, but also protecting you in the event that you have DR, which could come from something like a ransomware event, or any type of security event that happens. So, we definitely believe security is like an onion. It has to be done in layers, and the more layers, the better to protect that inside core, which is your corporate data, right? So, so we do that the best possible. We have a group of engineers focused on HPE, and we continue to be ranked very high by HPE for maintaining that group of people here with knowledgeable across their platform. That's what this shows. Again, anywhere from design and architecture to delivery, to integration, just assembling the components and that sort of thing. Want to spend a couple minutes that we have left here talking about GreenLake, which is HPE's consumption-based purchasing model, right? To acquire either hardware, software, which of course the Zerto falls in that category, and or managed services, right? So in the same way, and in the tools that go with it, in this case showing HPE GreenLake, in the same way that you may be familiar with consuming public cloud, there is the ability here, with HPE and WEI to consume the same consumption model for your physical hardware, software, and hosting either in your own data center or in a partner of ours data center like an Equinix. That infrastructure for those things that either don't go well to the cloud because they're not priced well in the cloud, they aren't secure enough in the cloud, or those things you just need to keep close to you and under your control. As people are finding out, not every workload works best in a public cloud. But you still, organizations are still looking for that consumption model to save on CapEx, to use the CapEx for expanding your business in the things that you need, not necessarily in things like IT. So WEI works a lot with HPE in GreenLake and companies to do that. We do have to get involved with the contract and doing that. Why do customers do it? Well, because the traditional way of building it, and you as IT solution providers sort of going to your management team, going to the company and arguing that you need hardware, is you have a project, you build for it. Most of the times we overbuild for it because we try to predict what's going to be there, but we know we have that very few shots to spend the money, so we typically overbuild on capacity, which means we have capacity that's there in the data center for a time that isn't being consumed, but we've already paid for it, or we continue to pay for it on a lease or whatever it is that we have consumed it on. With the consumption model, basically with the planning with both HPE and WEI design engineers, we provide that entire capacity that you need, and then your projects all fit within that. But then as time goes on, this is a building slide, as time goes on, your capacity needs change, they shrink or grow. And the idea here is for the environment that HPE provides to stay ahead of that along the way. So, if you determine the capacity that you need on day one, and that's appropriate, we all hope that the organization grows and that will grow. The HPE will stay ahead of it and automatically contact you and say, we need to add to the storage, we need to add to the compute, or we need to add to the networking in your environment. The way WEI works with HPE in doing that is the same way we work with organizations today, right? We're still providing that design. We're still, in many cases, deploying the infrastructure, providing integration, and doing all the traditional value add services that we do when even before HPE had a consumption model to use, right? So it is up to you, the customer, if you want to use WEI, and many of you do, as that provider for all of those services, you can still do that. That doesn't lock you out from doing that. And also WEI can add services above and beyond, whether it be staff augmentation or data center services or other vendor services into that contract, so that from your perspective, it looks and feels like you've been doing before, except that you've changed it to a consumption model. And that's pretty much all I had for everybody, just showing you here our current warehouse and how we're stocking. But if there's any questions, I would open it up for questions now. Kathy?
Great, thanks, Greg. I appreciate you jumping on for us today and giving us a download of WEI and how we are working with HPE. Do we have any questions for Greg or Tim? They're available for questions, or if there's any lingering questions for Rachel, please, jump off mute or put in the chat for us to share. I am not seeing anything in chat. I guess that's probably about it then. I think we can probably let everybody go. I think we're just a minute over where we were supposed to be today, so that's great. Thank you so much, everyone, for jumping on. Thank you, Rachel, for joining us today. That was a great conversation. Thank you, Greg and Tim. If anybody has any questions or would like to get more information about WEI, please reach out to marketing@wei.com, and we could certainly send information along to Rachel if that's specific for her, or questions for our sales team. So thank you, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Oh.